so good to me, and I have been so cruel to you. I know I'm not the person you expected me to be. My baby, I still care for you. Baby, I still wanna live with you. That's true. Only to you can I be faithful. I know this pain I've caused you, baby, hurts you deep inside. I only wish that I could find the words to heal your cry. I've also made you feel like you are losing love for me. Precious baby, I am weak, and only you can help me change the way I think. Only to you can I be faithful. So I say sorry. I hope that you can understand. Can you and I say sorry? I promise you from now I'll change. I just want you to know that I I'm looking forward to a time when I'll be down on one knee, looking at you so beautiful. I'm saying, will you marry me? I see a teardrop from your eye, and there's a smile on your face. Does this mean that your answer is a yes? I wanna spend my life with you. So blessed. Only to you can I be faithful. So I say sorry. I'm sorry that you can please don't leave me now. Kiss me till the sun goes down. Please don't leave me now. Kiss me till the sun goes down. Goes down, goes down, goes down, goes down. Kiss me till the sun goes down. Goes down. Don't leave me. Goes down. Kiss me till the sun goes down.
Off to the other side of town. Info wanna need to know, keep it on the low now. One more day, then I'm on my way. Trying to make the most of still seeing your face. Don't wanna think about it, rather stay in denial. Pretend it ain't a fact, at least for the meanwhile. But for the moment being, we in our own world make me feel like Jay-Z. Must be my dream girl.
Please don't leave me now. Kiss me till the sun goes down. Please don't leave me now. Kiss me till the sun goes down. Goes down, goes down, goes down, goes down. Kiss me till the sun goes down. Goes down, goes down, goes down. Kiss me till the sun goes
Kia rana koutou katoa, Nissan Boulevanaka, malo alale, talofa lava, warm Pacific greetings, and welcome to the joint RNZ Pacific PMN election debate focusing on our Pacific issues. We're joined by Labour's Carmel Sepuloni,
Kia rana.
ACT's Karen Chord, Nationals Whenote Agnes Lohene,
Talofa lava.
and Green Party's Tiano Toyono.
Kia ora.
Welcome everyone. We've got a lot to cover over the next 45 minutes, so let's get into it. Big announcements over the weekend on immigration. Carmel, I want to start with you. Your policy offers an amnesty or regularisation for overstayers of more than 10 years. Why has this taken so long, and don't you think Pacific voters can see right through it?
Oh, I think, we were really clear after the Dawn Raid's apology that this was something that we would start doing work on. We've continued to do that. In the end, the most appropriate way to do this was through a party policy promise as opposed to government activity. But we've said we'll do it in the first 100 days if we are re-elected. And we've been very clear about what it will look like and why we are doing it.
I think, like you said, you wanted to do this as just something that's Labour, but at the same time, the apology was 2 years ago, and then to find out that it would only take 100 days to roll out, it doesn't seem to sit well.
Well, I mean, you have to think about everything that has been expected of Immigration New Zealand in the last couple of years and the immense pressure that they have been under with respect to resuming business as usual, and above that, given the borders being closed and then the reopen, the requirement for additional visas because of the workforce shortages that we've been experiencing, a range of other things that Immigration New Zealand have been engaged with. That has meant that some of the work that we might have wanted to see done earlier hasn't been done, but we've said as a party this will be done in the first 100 days if we are re-elected.
Okay, Agnes, I'd like to go to you. National leader Christopher Luxon says this approach rewards rule breakers. Do you agree with your leader?
Yes, there is actually a point there, and I think, we all know people that have, they contact MPs in particular to have assistance in their process to residency, and it's hard, and we have to think about what it looks like for those who've gone through this process. And it may take a bit of time and a lot of work and anguish, and then to see, that now there could be an open channel if you've been here overstaying. I don't know more details on particular in terms of how many numbers we're looking at. But again, I think you raised the point about the apology was 2 years ago, and National absolutely agrees that what happened to our Pacific people in those days, and it was discrimination, was absolutely abhorrent. But we're now in 2023, and we have to look at how is this policy viewed for people that are working hard to go through the legal steps to become residents?
Karen, I'll go to you on that. What's the ACT Party's stance on overstayers?
Yeah, so we've got a similar stance. It's around rewarding people who have been actually breaking the law. And how is this fair to people who have gone through the proper processes to arrive here? I've known that in my own family, having people come here as refugees who have had to wait for a very long time to be accepted into this country. And then many who are coming here and waiting quite a long time to even know if they're going to be able to come here for a better life. So what are we telling those people? That if you break the rules, you're going to get rewarded for it. And we just don't see this as being a very good idea.
I just want to throw in here that I am an electorate MP and have been one for quite some time, and dealt with many cases where people have slipped into illegal migration status here, immigration status. Actually, a lot of the time, it's not necessarily through fault of their own. They've paid thousands of dollars, lots of them, to lawyers and advisors that haven't given them the best advice. There have been delays that through no fault of their own. The children, certainly, it's not their fault that they've ended up in this situation. And I've met young people who didn't even realise that they didn't have legal immigration status until their late teen years. And so I think we need to be really careful not to cast judgment on those that are here illegally, because certainly as an electorate MP, I've seen a lot of cases where people have tried to legitimise their status over and over again, but haven't been able to navigate the system successfully to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I want to follow on from that to you, Tiana. I'll bring you in. Green Party says the announcement doesn't go far enough, saying migrant workers are only a job loss away from being an overstayer, which is what Carmel was saying. What's missing out of this?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, the Green Party supports an amnesty for overstayers for everyone, and I want to acknowledge the work of groups like the Migrant Workers Association and the Pacific Leadership Forum, who actually came to Parliament to tell the Parliament about getting a petition for an amnesty for overstayers, something that we support as well. Waiting for the election to announce this, I think when actually this could have been done a couple of years ago, is something that's concerning for me as well. And also 10 years, why 10 years? What about people that are experiencing exploitation within 8 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever? But I also agree with the point around that sometimes people fall out of their legal status out of no fault of their own. There is exploitation that is happening out there. Maybe your employer gets taken out by a climate-fueled event like we saw in Cyclone Gabrielle as well. So some of these visa conditions, the way that they are tied to single employers, can be incredibly punitive.
Yeah, and I want to let you respond to that, Carmel, because this is a bit late in the game. You know, we are weeks out from the election, and Pacific people we know have a lower vote turnout rate and are usually less. There's quarter of Pacific voters who aren't registered to vote. So this does seem like a big carrot to dangle right now.
Well, no, I think I've given the rationale for why it's taken so long for us to be able to make this announcement, but it's certainly a strong commitment. And it's one that we know we can deliver on. It's all good to be able to say we're going to put up an amnesty, but if you know that all of the kind of system measures and everything else are not in place, or you're not going to be able to deliver on that, then that's not sincere. So we know that we are able to do that. The 10-year period that has been mentioned, there was some consideration given to what the time frame should be. Off the back of the Dawn Raid's apology, certainly want to capture anyone who may have been affected or been around during the Dawn Raids and still irregular, or have children that may still be impacted by that. The other group that we're particularly concerned about are those young people who are going on to tertiary education or will go into tertiary education, but we'll find that they can't go into tertiary education because they don't have legal immigration status. And that's one of the many stories that we've had raised with us on a number of occasions. I'll also add, with respect to our Pacific community, this is not the only policy that we have announced that we think will have benefits and will be of importance to our Pacific community. It is one of many.
And we will get to that. But in 2000, an amnesty was offered. It was only taken up by a third of what were considered would be eligible to take it on. What do you think's different this time?
Well, there's learnings to be taken from that particular example of when an amnesty was offered. I think some of the requirements in terms of paperwork that was expected of those who were trying to be covered by the amnesty were it's such a high bar that it meant that a whole lot of people were discounted. I heard, for instance, that boarding passes from when they first came over on flights were required. And so on top of that, there were still people too, I'll mention, that were too scared to come out because they didn't feel confident that they would meet the bar to be accepted for an amnesty, and therefore
only half of those eligible were
remained
able to
hidden. And so this is what's important for the time we do it next, so after the election, as we have said, is actually looking at the previous example and making sure that we don't put roadblocks unnecessarily in place that actually mean that a whole lot of people don't come forward to take up the opportunity to become regulated.
Agnes, your response to that?
I think the point that Carmel made earlier around children and children that are born here, I think definitely it but then that speaks to what are other steps that could be taken with immigration to ensure that there is that compassionate side, instead of just going to what can appear as an open amnesty. And then you've got people who could be here overstaying for 8 years or 9 years. And so you can see that there could be some perverse outcomes of thinking, well, you know, I've just got a few more years. And I just think it sends the wrong message for many people who are really working hard to go through the right channels in the queue to be citizens or to be residents here.
Yeah, Tiano, I see you frowning there.
Yeah, I mean, I see this within the trajectory of the Dawn Raid's apology, and I think we were probably all there as Whangamot to acknowledge the work that Opito did in that space. But I saw that as just the beginning step, and we heard very clearly that the community wanted to have an amnesty for overstayers, and that came through in select committee reports and petitions and those sorts of things. And there is precedent for an amnesty for overstayers. So I don't know what the block is here for me, because we've done it before, right? And we also, I think, need to think about our immigration settings in terms of the relationship that we have with the Pacific. We are a Pacific nation and a family of Pacific nations as well, and those relationships are really important. We've got the 60 years celebration that we had with the Treaty of Friendship with Samoa as well, and all of those other types of relationships that we have. It is incredibly, incredibly important, and I think an amnesty for overstayers is more than timely. It's late.
Okay, Karen, your response, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm just very wary of just a blanket amnesty, and I heard what Tana was saying around you just like one job away from maybe losing your visas and things like that, and we heard that a lot through COVID, and I think there's a lot of work to do with immigration around the processing times when people are applying for these kind of visas as well, because over COVID I heard of young people turning 18 and no longer on their parents' visas, and they were sitting there and they were unable to do anything until this paperwork came through. So
these part of the jobs that are going to be cut through ACT?
No, because we feel that there's work to do with immigration, and that's the way that we're looking at work visas at the moment is very complex and kind of hard for people to come in, and just having these pathways to come here through certain jobs. There were a lot of jobs that we could have offered people here, but they were excluded from that green list. So we need to have a good look at that green list and make sure we're not excluding people that could bring their skills here. But the issue is around tying them to a certain employer, because that sets them up for exploitation if that employer is not taking care of them. And so we'd like to look around making sure that, we still have to have processes in place to make sure that that's an accredited employer, but not tying people to one employer, and allow that process to be a bit more flexible.
Thank you, Karen. We will get on to RSC workers and their working conditions, but I want to go to health now. We know that the life expectancy for Pacific men is 5 years less than the national average. For women, it's almost 4 years. We're twice as likely to die from heart disease, got the highest obesity rates, 4 times more likely to have kidney failure. This is a terrible list. Agnes, I'll start with you. What will your policies do to address this?
Right. Well, we've said that the health system in New Zealand is an absolute crisis. I don't think there's anyone that you will talk to who is, challenging trying to get in front of their GP, or when you're at the hospital, those wait list times have blown out as well. So right now in the system, we know that we're about 4,800 nurses short across the country. We're about 1,700 GPs short, and about 1,000 midwives. And that's the number one issue at the moment is health workforce. So we've got a policy to address that, to bring more doctors into the system through a third medical school and increasing numbers at the current medical schools, as well as attracting more nurses and midwives into the profession by offering to pay their student loan for the first 5 years if they stay here, and they'll be bonded to New Zealand. Because at the moment we've lost a lot of nurses to Australia and other countries, and that's for midwives as well. And there's also wanting to attract nurses into New Zealand, because actually worldwide is a shortage, and so there are other lucrative deals as well for nurses overseas. So we want them to come here, so we will make a visa process better for them, plus a relocation grant as well. So look, that's the number one thing we have to hit straight away. And as you said, the numbers are grim for Pacific, but we've got to have the health workforce here.
Carmel, your response?
Yeah, sure, there is a lot to do, and I will say that the health workforce shortages really come down to years of underinvestment in building the workforce that we need. What we have seen over the course of the last year is, I think, 2,500 nurses come from overseas as part of via immigration. And also what we've seen since 2019 is around 1,000 health scholarships go to Pacific people. We've got to find ways to actually build the workforce. Some of that will be immigration, some of that has to be through building our domestic workforce here. I also just want to add that I've had lots of contact with the health system in the last year, with my son breaking his leg. My dad was in there for a while. My husband's auntie, unfortunately, had a stroke and was in there. And I'm really proud of our health workers and the health system that we have access to here in Aotearoa. It certainly isn't perfect. As a government, we have been very much focused on making sure that we have consistency of provision of care across the country, and that includes for Pacific people, and there's still work to do there, but we're definitely on the right track, and I'm really grateful to the health system and what it has done for me and my family over the course of the last year.
Yeah, and you talk about access, and Karen, I want to go to you because many Pacific people delay these vital medical appointments because of cost, transport, can't wait days or weeks to see a GP. How can we get them through the door?
Yeah, and this is a problem I'm hearing all around the country, and especially up north. Just the lack of GPs up north. I mean, I think even the rest home up there lost their last GP, and they're having to drive people from Kaitaia down to Whangarei just for GP appointments. And I mean, we need to actually start investing in the frontline services, because the reason our emergency departments are so overloaded is because actually our frontline services have not been resourced as well as they could be. So we'd actually increased the funding by about 13% for GPs, and making sure that they actually got the resources they need. Would also enable like physician assistants to actually do some of the work and take the pressure off the GPs, the simple tasks that maybe a GP could pass on to those who are qualified enough to be making those decisions, just to help that process to ease the hospital services.
Okay, and Tiana, what will the Green Party do?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about one specific thing that we want to do, and that is free dental, but that's for everyone. And I was thinking about this in the context of our elders and our parents as well. They'll delay things because they've got to pay for all these other bills, but when it times comes for them to go down to the dentist, they don't do it because it is so expensive. So we think it's important that we have free dental care for everyone, and I think this would help our Pacifica communities. Just a little bit also on the workforce issues as well. I think we agree with what the problem is. We need to improve working and pay conditions for all our frontline workers and support the amazing work that they're doing out there as well. But one of the things that we found with the People's Inquiry into Student Poverty, which Chloe Swarbrick led on our side, was that 2/3 of students experience hardship and poverty. So 2/3 of students. So why would you go to study to become a nurse or a health worker or a teacher or anything like that if you're going to be poor, right? So one of the other policies that we're bringing to this election is an income guarantee to make sure that if you're a student or a person that's just fallen out of work, you've got that money to be able to go to university, for example, as well. And we would fund all of that for a wealth tax.
Yes, well, I was going to say, how are you going to pay for this? Because a wealth tax has been ruled out by Labour.
What I would say is that it's up to the voters in terms of the mandate. The voters decide what we as politicians will negotiate or have our conversations on, and we'll find that out on October the 14th. And if there's a mandate for a conversation to be had around a wealth tax or a fairer tax system in general, we should have that conversation.
It's up to you. It's up to you, voters.
It's up to you, whānau.
It is. Agnes, I want to go to you because we talk about these Pacific terrible rates in health. As much as it is to build the workforce, we're not getting the health outcomes that we want for our Pacific people and life expectancy and all the stats. I know that health spokesperson Shane Reti has said he doesn't agree with race-based funding. How can you not see the need for Pacific people?
Well, we don't agree with race-based funding because we agree it should be on need. And typically, as you've said, Pacifica will be up there in terms of need. So that's how we address it. I think, when you start wanting to tag health dollars on your race, it's actually not going to give you the results you want. You actually want to have the people that are the most need, and if Pacific and Māori tend to be there, they are there.
We already know, yes, they have the most need.
Yep. And so we stand on that it should be given on need.
And I speaking to that, I think, as you have said, that the statistics show really clearly that Māori and Pacific are not getting access to the healthcare that they need to the same extent as what some other New Zealanders are. Not just Māori and Pacific, though. Those living in rural communities are another group that has been identified as missing out or not getting the access that they need. This is probably the thing I've been most disappointed about the whole way through this campaign is the attack on simple equity measures like this. This is not about giving Māori and Pacific any advantage because we are disadvantaged given our health outcomes and our lack of access to the health system. It was always going to be on need first, but another criteria under that is then Māori, Pacific or rural. And it's about fairness. It's about trying to address some of the health inequalities that exist. It's been actually worked up to a frenzy, and those of us out on the debate trail campaigning at the moment have seen that, where it's been incredibly ugly to see the level of racism that has resulted because of the rhetoric around measures like this when they are purely equity measures and they should be embraced by everyone.
But yeah, sorry. Okay.
I actually think that that's a little bit harsh. When we go around the country, we're hearing from people that just want to know that our health system is going to take care of them when they need it to take care of them, no matter what ethnicity they are, and making sure that if they have cancer and they need a cancer treatment, if they have a broken bone, that they're not going to be waiting in an emergency department for 48 hours to get that bone set. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, you need to get the treatment when you need it. And I think people are really worried when they hear that part of that decision making is based on race. And they feel that this is just setting us backwards and dividing us as you're in this camp and you're in that camp, and we should be working together as one. My issue is like in my household and with my family, there's lots of different ethnicities there, and they feel like that they're being treated differently. They go for a service and some of them have to pay and some of them don't. And there are some Māori that are doing very well. They're offered services that are paid for when they could quite frankly pay for it themselves. And then there's some that aren't doing so well that do need that help, and we should provide it. It shouldn't be based on ethnicity. It should be based on need.
But here's the issue, and I support what Carmel was saying. If you've got bi-Pacific, for Pacific health providers, that's good for our people, because some of our people, they won't go down there if that person doesn't speak their language or they don't have the cultural framework. And so I agree with what Carmel was saying. We of course we start off with needs as well, but then you've got to think about, well, what can we do to reduce the inequities in health for Māori and Pacific? Well, you have a framework, you have ways for them to access health services which make cultural and linguistic sense for them.
We don't disagree on outreach. That's different. There are ways that you need to take different channels to reach those communities, whether it's rural or a particular ethnic group around language. In fact, we support a lot of outreach going into the community. The solution was not to do this massive, expensive, restructure of health at this time, particularly post-COVID, and particularly the health workforce challenges we were already facing prior to COVID.
Is that not race-based policies?
It's not race-based policies if you want to do outreach. It's still based on need, but outreach doesn't mean that it is race-based. It's reaching different communities, which includes rural, which includes other people.
Okay, there's so much we could say on this, and I know if you just went to the waiting room at Middlemore, you would see the ethnicity of the people sitting there, and many would argue that there needs to be...
Not even just at Middlemore.
Not just, you're right, not just at Middlemore, but we do need to keep moving. Yeah. But one of the drivers of poor health is housing. So 40% of our Pacific children live in overcrowded homes. 1 in 10 Pacific children live in damp and mouldy homes. They're 80 more times more likely to develop acute rheumatic fever, which can lead to heart disease and death. Former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern called this a national shame. Karen, I'll go to you. How are you going to improve our houses for Pacific children?
Yeah, I think we need to improve our houses for everybody, to be quite frank. I think there's many people struggling within the communities, and I see what great jobs that actual community organisations are doing within their individual communities. They know their communities, they understand them, and whether that be Māori, Pacifica,
Shouldn't
or
we give
any
them the
other
money
community.
to do that?
I think if we can devolve back to community organisations and NGOs, I just think there just needs to be a little bit more accountability of where that money's going and making sure we're getting measurable outcomes at the end of the day, because this is real people's lives that we're dealing with, and it's not about putting more money into something, it's about making sure that that money is actually accomplishing something, and there's many organisations that do a fantastic job at that, but I think the real issue is around actually the red tape that it takes to build a home. And you talk to some community organisations and they may have the funding, they may be able to actually build those homes, but actually getting the consent process and going through all that rigmarole can actually take longer than building the homes. So we need to make sure that we're actually bringing the cost of building down too. We've got policies around making the material equivalence register with countries that we deal deal with overseas that are very similar
I
to us.
feel like this is helping a lot of builders and landlords, but not the people living in it.
Yeah, well, you have to build houses for people to live in them.
Yes.
And you have to build houses that in certain communities that suit that community. I remember looking for a home where I am on the North Shore, and I have lots of children, and finding a bigger home with more bedrooms was very difficult. And so we need to look at how we're planning and where we're building these homes, because where you've got smaller families, you can build smaller homes. Where you've got bigger families, you need bigger homes. I just think we need to be planning a lot better and just building all these homes in small spaces. It's good for a short-term solution, but long-term, not so much for our communities.
Carmel, your response to that?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the health concerns associated with housing for Pacific people. Rheumatic fever should not be part of our lives, and it is absolutely preventable. And we know one of the biggest causes are cold, damp, mouldy homes. And so we very much over our time focused on investing in that space, putting requirements on landlords to actually have standards around the warmth in their homes, the insulation that exists.
Isn't this making things more expensive though?
Well, the national parties say, and they have in the past, and I think ACT as well have disagreed because they thought that we were putting too many obligations or measures onto landlords. Well, it's the very least that we should expect that if you're offering a service, then it doesn't make people sick, and it's our people disproportionately because they are larger renters, because we have lower home ownership, that are reliant on that housing stock being warm and being safe to live in. And so I think it was a necessity, and I don't resile from the decisions and the investments that we've made there. It's not just about that though, it is about increasing the public housing that we have available so our people have the options. And so we have increased that by 13,000 homes. We stopped selling them off. We've got 2,700 Pacific people signed up with our program that provides them with support to pathway into home ownership. So there's a range of things going on here. Finally, I'll just say some of our Pacific populated areas are getting investment that they never had before, like the 1.5 billion we put into Porirua for housing revitalisation. That's not just the houses, that's all the infrastructure that goes around that, and that's going to be important for that densely populated Pacific community, and that shows our commitment to our Pacific people.
I think we need to be a bit more honest around that as well.
I have been honest,
Well, there's
Karen.
all these pressures on landlords to comply with these standards, but Kaianga Ora is one of the worst landlords in some cases, where they don't meet those standards and where they've got extra time to meet those standards. Government should be held to the same account as the landlords if you're going to talk in that way. And we hear story after story about how Kaianga Ora homes are actually making our young kids sick too. So blame landlords and only landlords. I just wanted to point that out.
And I'll
too.
say Kaianga Ora has the biggest housing stock as part of being a landlord, and absolutely agree. We need to get all of our public houses up to standard as well.
Yes, so set these regulations, and can you match them as a state landlord?
On the Kaianga Ora build as well, I think we also need to make sure that the builds are also multi-generational, because Pacific families are actually, it's not just two parents and three kids and a white picket fence, it's everybody else as well, so making sure that's factored in as well, but agree that they need to be healthy, warm homes as well. And so for our part, we've put in a pledge to renters, so making sure that we have a rental warrant of fitness, so regardless of where you live, that it's important that you have a warm, healthy, insulated home. When we put out that policy, we had renters send in photos of some of their accommodation where they were living. Some of it was terrible. It's like mushrooms growing on the floor, broken windows, all of this,
cheaper rent, don't
all of this kind of carry on. Well, it's not acceptable in a country like New Zealand that some of the accommodation that our people are living is like this, and also acknowledging that there are 1.4 million renters within Aotearoa, New Zealand, and many of those people are our people.
Yeah, you're right. And Agnes, I haven't given you a chance to respond. How is the National Party going to help Pacific renters?
Well, I just want to come back to these, to the state houses. I grew up in a state house, crowd of 15 people, and one of my sisters has lived with asthma her whole life, and in fact it put her behind in school. This is the reality, and so we've always been supportive of making sure that our homes, whether they're our Kāinga Ora homes or private landlords.
Didn't National want to
Drive.
scrap the Healthy Homes Initiative?
We had our own policies around, standards for healthy homes. Again, it was trying to strike that balance to ensure that there was still an incentive for landlords to want to be landlords. Otherwise, what we've seen at the moment, we've seen a drop in rental properties and then rent's gone up. But there's been other layers of red tape and costs put on landlords that have absolutely driven rents up, and rents have gone up $180 per week under this government. And that's reality. So when we look at housing, we've got to look at housing across the continuum from, unfortunately, we still need social housing, emergency housing. We've got 500 people living in cars at the moment. So we've got a priority category to move those people who've been living in cars further up that social housing list. We need more of social housing. And it was actually the national government that actually supported this, that what we have now is community housing providers, because we actually can understand that actually the government aren't the best landlords. There are actually groups in the community that are better at actually building houses for that community and whatever bedroom that they know these communities need, 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes, to be supported. And that was cut off under Labor, so they haven't been able.
The community
they haven't been able to grow.
It's
so
about
we're
having
going to
both.
offer, an infrastructure funding for those chips to be able to bid alongside Housing New Zealand or Kāinga Ora to actually build homes and provide that wraparound support for those families, because we find that they're actually better at it because they're in those communities.
Respectfully, I have to say that under the previous national government, public houses were sold off. And so, we've had to work hard to build them back. And I would never, ever devolve the government's responsibility for public housing. It's something that the government should continue with. But there's community housing providers have continued. They continue to be supported by the government. It's not one or the other. It is both that are required.
And another way to keep rents affordable is that you cap rents. Right, so that's predictable for people. I've heard many stories where the rent has kind of jumped up and they had no idea that it was coming through. So if you actually have rental caps, then that creates certainty for everybody.
Thank you, Tiana. We need to keep moving. Great food for thought, everyone. Education. The action plan for Pacific education lists racism, bullying, low expectations from some teachers, not having enough food or money for transport as factors in low engagement and achievement. We checked with Rowandale School Principal, Carl Vassal. He wants to know what initiatives your party will introduce that will work for Pacific students. Tiana, I'll start with you.
I totally acknowledge all the work that our frontline teachers are doing out there as well, and it's important that we support our teachers in acknowledging the strikes that have been happening on through this year as well. But he is right. That's why we've come out with an income guarantee as well to support
we're talking school education.
Yeah, I was just thinking outside of the school gate, right? So if you deal with the inequities that are happening outside the school gate, that flows into the school as well. So if you make sure that you've got all that stuff around, making sure that our tamariki are in warm homes, healthy homes, and that there's food coming on the table because you've got things like an income guarantee, that's a good thing. We would also support extending ka ora, the school lunches and program, but we would also extend that to 135,000 more tamariki, because what we know is that if kids are hungry, it's very hard for them to learn, and for some of our kids, this is the one meal that they'll get, healthy meal that they'll get in the day as well. And we also included and cost that into our use of a wealth tax.
Okay, Agnes, I know you're passionate about education.
Very. So we've got a Teaching the Basics Brilliantly program, because actually what's happening and what we've all seen is that education has been on steady decline for some time. And actually out of all the numbers that I've gotten sheets in front of me on stats and things like that, the one that
We'll come back to you, Agnes,
Sorry.
if you like.
The one that upsets me the most is 14.2% of our Year 8 students, this was tested in 2022, 14.5% reach the minimum curriculum for maths. And the general number was actually 41.5. So our Pacifica students, 14.5. That is actually real in terms of their ability to have earning potential as young adults. And please don't say it's COVID, because why is Pacifica students the lowest of all groups and nothing has been done?
Isn't this the argument to put more money into Pacific students?
Well, look, $5 billion more on education under this government for 1,400 more public servants, and yet those numbers have gone backwards.
A lot of that went towards pay for teachers because
At the end of the day,
under the previous national
at the end of the day,
government.
this government has failed our students, our Pacifica students, and that needs to be turned around. And I want the same attention put on a national government to hold us to account, to lift achievement for all students, including our Pacifica students.
Thank you.
Just to talk on the part of the teachers, but I talk to some teachers where their pay rise hasn't kept up with inflation for 10 years. So some of that money was vital money that needed to go to our teachers, because the working conditions of our teachers, those are the learning conditions of our tamariki.
Yeah, some would argue underinvestment for decades.
Yeah.
Karen?
Yeah, and when you're talking to teachers as well, is their jobs have got really complex over the last few years. Not only are they teachers, they're social workers. Kids have been through a lot. They've effectively had interrupted education for the last 3 years. A lot of them are feeling anxiety about whether they're going to pass their exams. A lot of them are suffering from mental health issues because of the last 3 years. And a lot of them are socially behind as well. So teachers are dealing with all of this on top of actually trying to educate our kids. We're very passionate about education, and we've talked a lot about charter schools and partnership schools and how they were really good for young people who didn't quite fit into the education system as it is. And it was shut down under this government.
Could we?
And we would really like to bring that back. Give the kids an option if they aren't fitting into that school environment, that they can be part of a partnership school where the learning is a bit more flexible and based around their needs.
Okay, so your solution is to just give them a separate school?
No, not just that. I mean, we need to make sure that our children have stable homes for starters, because when you're not stable at home, you're not stable at school. We have children living in motels with uncertainty about where they're going to be from week to week. We have children that aren't being enrolled in school because of that fact, because parents don't know which school to enrol them in because they don't know.
And you want to introduce infringement notices for chronic truancy? How would that work?
That doesn't work.
Are you going to fine parents for missing school?
Yeah, well, we want to make sure that kids are actually going to school in front of a teacher and actually learning, and it'd be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think there's already issues if they're not showing up to school. Do you think fining them is going to help?
Well, I just think there has to start being consequences around making sure our children are going to school.
So more punishments.
Well, making sure that we're finding out what the reason is first. Don't go straight in there and say you're getting an infringement notice because your kids isn't going to school. I mean, you need to make sure that that we know the reasons first, and if it's chronic truancy where there's actually help's been offered and the children still aren't showing up to school, then there has to be consequences for that.
Carmel, I'll move on to you.
Yeah, I will say that policy is one that has been in place before. So under the previous national government, they increased the infringement fees.
$30 a day.
Yeah, well, I think it was like over $1,000 if you were chronically truant for parents. It was. I don't even know if they enforced it once. And if they did, it would have been a handful of times. And so it's just, unfortunately, in that space, talking a big game, but it doesn't actually have the positive impact. I want to acknowledge principals and teachers that are out there doing this very important job, including Carl Vassell, that put the question to you. We went to Teachers College together. I always knew he'd be a great advocate for education. Some of the things that I'm most proud of were really reflected in one of the schools that I visited in the Bay of Islands recently. It is a high deprivation area when I went, predominantly Māori in that school. They have the Food in Schools program now. That's making a difference with respect to the kids actually showing up. New classrooms, new basketball turf, new food tech space. They've got period products in schools. They have also got the system in place where the government gives the money so they don't have to charge a donation, because they were never getting that donation from those particular families anyway. These are measures that help to assist with the education that goes on, but also address some of the social challenges that these families are facing outside of the school. And, you know, these are the types of investment that Labor has on our track record, and these are the types of things that we would want to continue doing. It isn't just about, although it's very important, the education that happens. It's about getting the kids there and addressing some of their social issues.
I think we've all brought that up, but I just want to finish with you, Agnes, because I can tell this means a lot to you.
I mean, I think it means a lot to everybody, and it's just that particular number says a lot about what we're setting up for those young children, and that's at the end of the year 8, which says that they were not given the basics properly, which is why the 1 hour, you know, we can support period products, but we need to have the 1 hour of maths, 1 hour of reading, 1 hour of, you know, writing every single day at that early level to lock that in. That needs to be the priority.
Yeah, I think we all want these outcomes, and we're all saying that there's a bigger picture here. That there's so many other factors, which needs to move along to another thing that our voters are very concerned about. Is we talk about gangs, we talk about crime rates. Some of these are the pathways for kids that are not in school. But what I want to do is take a step back and look at some of the influences or precursors to crime, which is home life. And Karen, you mentioned this before, growing up in a stable home. Almost half of our Pacific children are likely to grow up around family violence. Pacific children are twice as likely to be hospitalised due to assault, neglect and maltreatment. These are shocking numbers. How do we change this?
Yeah, this is something that I'm very passionate about. This is why I put my hand up to come into Parliament. None of us want to come into Parliament to make people's lives worse. We want to come in there I'm very passionate about this too, because the beginning of our lives is such an important part of our lives, and we need to make sure that first 5 years of a child's life is a happy life, is a safe life, and that we are helping parents to make sure that they can be the best parents that they can be. But sometimes there are parents that maybe they can't, and we have to, as a government, if you're in government, make sure that if we are removing children from those environments, which does happen, that we're not removing them from one unsafe environment into another, and we're not doing that well.
Isn't
and
that
so a lot
more
of
prison beds? Isn't that doing that?
Well,
exact
no,
thing?
because I mean, at the end of the day, if a child is not safe, and we know that child's not safe, aren't we obligated to make sure that that child is getting everything they need to have the best start in life, to have people around them that love them and care for them, and that are going to make sure that they get an education, that they get in front of a GP, that they get the mental health care that they need. And that's really important to me. But the first thing should be, if they can be with family, let's try and make that happen. And we need to work with family and the children. And I don't think we do that very well right now. So I have released a policy specifically on oranga tamariki and our young kids and how we do that. And I think that this topic is more important than we really do understand. We've got another generation that's going to be failed if we don't fix that.
Yeah, Carmel, I want to give you the chance to respond, because you have been the Minister of Social Development and you work with many of these factors.
Yeah. I've also co-led the work addressing the youth crime situation that we've been faced with. I have to say the data is really clear. All of those kids that have been involved in ram raids and those types of activities, the vast majority have had family harm histories. The vast majority have someone in their close or immediate family who has been incarcerated and put through the prison system. And a large number of them, if not all of them, have not presented or have experienced truancy issues, and so have not been actively, consistently in the schooling system. We don't think locking up people helps. And actually, when you look at the history of these young people who are involved in criminal activities, the fact that a larger number of them have family members who have been locked up goes to show that there are intergenerational impacts from that. It's almost like an opportunity for gangs to actually recruit once they're in there. And so we don't think that that is the answer. What we are seeing with programs like we've put in place for those young people that have committed ram raids is actually really positive results. Over 80% of them, I believe, not going on to re-offend. What that takes is a lot more than just simply locking them away. It actually requires full wraparound support for not just them, but for their siblings and their families. It has to be in situ. You can't just take them out and put them in a boot camp, because when they finish at that boot camp, they're coming back to the social issues that led to the behaviours in the first place. And so it has to be full wraparound. It has to be all the government agencies and community organisations that are required to address the challenges that have led to the behaviour. It's harder, but it works.
And more expensive.
And it is more expensive, but it's going to be cheaper in the longer term if we're able to address the whole whānau's issues so that the behaviour doesn't continue, and so that other things don't happen in that household too.
Yeah, I want to go to Agnes, because this could be called soft on crime. What's National's response to that?
Well, this is a big issue. So if we talk about, so on one side we've got, we're talking about the challenges. So our young people who are committing crime or ram raids, you generally can go back and you can see that there's been dysfunction in the family or addiction, and so we have to tackle that in terms of social investment. And in the last, we don't have it out now, but in our last campaign in 2020, we had a policy around first 1,000 days, critical time to support mums, dads and babies, and to pick up any issues there where they could have extra support, so that child doesn't get to 10, decides they don't want to go to school, and then sees a pathway into an adventure in a car, into a dairy. So that's one side. At the other end, we absolutely, those young people, we have to try and change their life around. And so if you're soft on them, what they see is they can continue in that. And so we do have policies around military academies where they are going to have wraparound support. No, they do work. There'll be wraparound support, there'll be coaches in the community. You cannot put them back into the same environment where they haven't learnt anything. You're not giving that 10-year-old, 12-year-old a chance to change their life around.
It actually has an 80%
before
rate,
they get
those
to
types of boot
No,
camps.
No, that's incorrect.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I'll leave it to Tiano to respond
so we've
to that
got,
one.
We've got to. Then the other side of the equation is actually we have to keep our communities safe. So whilst we are dealing with, these are long-term issues here that we absolutely have to address, whatever government's in, we also have to make sure that we are keeping our communities safe, families, people on the street. There's just violence now, young girls being attacked at bus stops, at train stations. I don't actually like my son now to be at the train station too late at night. That's a terrible situation to be in, that you feel that your child's not safe just busing or training home.
Yeah, no,
This
it's
is
all a major
reality.
issue, and there are realities for our people. Tiana, I want to give you a response before we need to wrap it up.
well,
Time's going fast.
The problem with National is that they're soft on poverty. Like, we've all just
That's
acknowledged
incorrect.
the long-term systemic issues here, and it does require money being put on the table to have all those wraparound services. So if people are falling off the wagon, they can get addiction support, mental health support, all of these things. But it does require support from the state. And we also have to address those underlying drivers of poverty as well. Because if you have the stable home life, because there's food on the table, the family can afford to keep the lights on, and the health is a healthy one. That helps to stabilise our families. That's what we should be doing. Locking them up into boot camps, it just won't work.
Which is why you need a strong and growing economy to be able to do
so
that.
many
Fear
things.
going to work every day, because either A, they're going to come to work and find that their shop's had a car rammed through the front door, or B, someone's going to jump the counter and attack them for what's behind their
We've
counter.
actually seen a massive
there has
decline.
to be consequences for that behaviour.
We've seen a massive decline, and just talking a big game about punishing people is not necessarily going to address the issues. Doing what we've done has resulted in a massive decline in ram raids, and we've got to continue that work.
Okay, there's so much we need to do on this, but we need to wrap up. One sentence from each of you, please, on climate change and how your party is going to improve this. Agnes, we'll start with you.
We've got policies out to double renewable energy. We're going to help farmers also clean up in their areas, and we're going to also invest in public transport as well.
Okay, public transport, thank you. Tiana?
Well, the Green Party has a very strong record on taking climate action as well. So a vote for the Greens is a vote for climate action. It's a vote for supporting our communities to become more climate resilient as well. And in our climate safe communities policy, we've got some money set aside to support our towns and our councils to make their towns and councils more climate resilient. We also need to keep mitigating our emissions as well, because when we do that, we play our part in the wider picture of things, and just recognising and remembering that actually Aotearoa New Zealand is a Pacific nation and a family of Pacific nations.
Thank you. Carmel?
There's too much at risk for our country and the planet to not take action, and so we are action oriented. Our track record with the Greens, I will say, goes to show that we have been able to reduce carbon emissions. It's very scary to think that some of the very successful initiatives that we've put in place together are now currently at stake because other political parties don't want to continue to support them. This is not just about our trade environment, although that is very important. It is about our planet, and we should be prioritising this. We certainly will be.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got policies in areas around that, around making sure we're also looking at adaptation for climate change and making sure that our communities are adapting to what might be coming as well. Investing in making sure, like in Sunninook where I live, where the fields were created, were dug down and created to hold the water that was coming their way, and that actually stopped a lot of the flooding during the cyclone. And so looking at how we're building our infrastructure and adapting to climate change.
Thank you. Just finally, quick pitch to our voters. 30 seconds. Well, yes, climate change is very important to the wider region, but Tiana, we'll start with you. Why should Pacific voters vote for the Green Party?
Well, kia ora everyone. A vote for the Green Party is a vote for climate and community. It's a vote for people and for the planet, and people before profit. We know that we're in the middle of a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis, and over that is the crisis of inequality, and the Green Party, we have the solutions to address all of those issues, so party vote Green.
Talofa everyone. So I believe the National Party is a great choice for Pacific people this election. National Party believes in strong families and caring communities, and therefore the best way that we can support families is to grow a strong economy so that we can have those choices, that we can have options, opportunities in work, deal with the cost of living, and ensure that we can support and grow those very important areas, education and health for our people.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, ACT has policies around education and giving our kids choice and options within education. Making housing more affordable by cutting red tape and making it easier to build, and also looking at about families, being able to bring your family here to help you when you're trying to build a start, when you first had children, and enabling your family to come here and be here with you in those most important times, because we understand that it takes a community to raise a baby, and those first 5 years are so important, and if we can allow parents to come here and help out for those first 5 years, I think that will help build a healthy relationship within the family.
Talofa lava, I've been very proud to be part of a Labour government who takes our Pacific community very seriously and values the contribution that our Pacific people have always made. I've had the privilege of being Deputy Prime Minister and working alongside 10 other Pacific MPs. Representation is important. We are your voice and have been your voice at the table. That is how we've been able to make traction in the housing space and the health space, get more funding for education and a range of other areas, and we will continue that work. We believe every New Zealander deserves equal opportunity to be able to get ahead. Our people are here working hard, and they deserve to be backed by a government who believes in them, and that is the Labour Party.
Okay, whawhetai lava, malo pito for joining us today. And for those watching, we hope this has helped you decide your vote for October the 14th. We all want what's best for New Zealand and for the people living here to thrive. Even if we disagree on how that looks and how to go about this, I hope we can leave this space as tangata moana, people of the Pacific, with the va intact. We had Labour's Carmel Sepuloni, thank you, ACT's Karen Chua, Agnes Lohini from National and Green Party, Tiano Tuiono. Best of luck for the campaign, everyone. Kia manuia.
Thank you.
Thank you.